All right, Chelsea fans, welcome back to another episode. That's right, of the London is Blue podcast. Hopefully, your favorite Chelsea podcast out there, and a part of the Men in Blazers Media Network. Dan, one of your hosts here, alongside good friend Sam, CFC Central, and it's another match preview podcast. That's right, we're taking a look at the upcoming fixture that Chelsea have against West Ham United in the Premier League. And look, points are at a premium. Chelsea on the outside looking in at the moment in sixth place, desperately, passionately desiring a return to Champions League football and European nights that are not related to the Conference League or Europa League next season. And so this match, ultra important, always a bit of a narrative, always a bit of a storyline between these two London clubs, with the added boost and benefit now, Sam, of one Graham Potter being reintroduced into our lives as well in this matchup. So if you didn't have enough storylines already, you got this extra one we can dig into too.
And the last thing you need is somebody called Potter trying to work magic. I think that goes really well. So hoping that spark doesn't happen against us. But yeah, there is a pretty great narrative, and hoping that we don't make the wrong kind of headlines. So pretty good time to face them then, which I mean we'll discuss later on in the podcast, but quite an enticing fixture. I think we do need to get back to form if we are to make those Champions League spots.
Yeah, this West Ham team has effectively been I think they peaked like at the 8th position in the second week of the Premier League season, and they've effectively been between 12th and 15th place over that remaining time, which leads to why there was a change in an appointment within the managerial level. I mean, they currently sit in 14th place. So we'll get into more specifics about just how they're going, what's going on for them, what's working well, what's not working well. We'll take a look at a little bit about where we think Chelsea might have the advantage in some key matchups, what Maresca would want to do, would want to see from his players. Sam always return a couple questions at me. I'll try to keep those volleyed and give back a appropriate response on what we think might happen in the match. We'll land with some predictions too to close it all out. So that is our match preview pod. Before we get into all the other stuff, the quick admin, as always, thank you for leaving 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. We always appreciate those. If you want to also get involved and help us on YouTube, you can subscribe to the channel, hit the like icon and bell to get notified as well, so that we know that you like it. We appreciate it. We know you like it because there's comments, but give us the other like digital kudos. We appreciate that. You can sign up for our free weekly newsletter, the London is Blue Dispatch, written by my co-host right now, the wonderful Sam, CFC Central. Comes out every week and is free. So why not? And then you can also get involved in our free or paid versions of the Discord community too. And still a few spots left on that trip to London. Almost 30 people in the group at this point. One away from 30 people, not including Nick and myself. So it's going to be a pretty big group heading to London with our friends at XL Tours as well. End of March, beginning of April. We'd love to have you come along if you were thinking about it. Need a couple extra days to get it done. We're happy to work with them to get you included in that. But look, Sam, it's West Ham. What's your general thoughts about playing West Ham? Maybe to set the stage, because we always get people coming to the podcast. Maybe it's their first time listening to us. Maybe they're a new Chelsea supporter, not just someone who's been around for generations. Playing West Ham, do you have a thought, a feel, an energy that you associate with that?
Yeah, so I would say that it's been tumultuous, to be honest. Like it's been very torrid from um, every perspective that you look at. They hired a very good manager, Julian Lopetegui, somebody that I rate very, very highly. They also got Tim Steidten, who's a very good sporting director from the Bundesliga, I think with Leverkusen, spotted some real gems there, and thought they had like a pretty good plan in place. Got some pretty good players that were linked with top clubs, and it did look like a project that was destined to go places, but a lot of chaos in the background. So this season, the results didn't go their way. There was, I think, a conflict between the style of play that Lopetegui was trying to implement versus what the players were putting out. So there was a little bit of discrepancy there. There was also a lot of behind the scenes fighting happening between the manager and the sporting director, who apparently did not see eye to eye. And then it just became murky at that point, and where the manager knew he was fired, and the sporting director had basically advocated for it, and he was hunting for his successors while the manager was forced to sort of take training. So just all over the place. And from there, both of them got fired within like 10 days of each other. So they've had to start anew. But Potter took charge. He's basically got 3 games under his belt now. We'll talk about like what he's tried to do in that short time. So tactically, it's
Mhm.
going to be very hard to predict what is going to happen, but did very well in his first game back. They raced into a 2-0 lead against Fulham, which is a very good team. But again, like familiar struggles sort of bit them, and they just about made it home 3-2. Then they lost to Palace 2-0. And then after that, they drew against Villa, which I think they played really, really well and could have escaped with more than just a point. So they've basically done the win loss draw in the 3 games, have displayed a change in playing style, which we'll also discuss later in the podcast, but quite an intriguing time to play them, Dan. I think there is a shift happening from what they've been comfortable with or what they've been asked to do towards a more progressive style. And when that happens, there are moments that you can exploit and really sort of nail home the point. So hopefully there will be a couple of those moments in the game and we can take full advantage.
I feel like a win-loss draw is the perfect Graham Potter experience. It's the perfect Potter to get like those results because it keeps him completely even in what he's done for the club. Um, yeah, that is very interesting. I mean, our recent record for West Ham, for those who've not kept it in full view. I mean, last season was really great. It was 2 wins in a season. I mean, we hadn't necessarily done that until like 2 seasons prior. So it was nice to see a little bit of return to form there. It was a 5-0 win at home and then a 3-0 win away. So 8-0 on aggregate, all 6 points claimed against West Ham last season. Very, very nice. Last 10 games, 6 wins, 1 draw, and 3 losses. So, you know, and really like 2 of those came across the back half of the 2019 season and then 2020. So like some interesting things there. We don't often play them in any other competition other than the Premier League. We don't get drawn against them in the FA Cups usually. We don't get drawn against them in the League Cups. I mean, you have to go back to League Cup 2016. It was lost there, and then like early 2000s for FA Cup fixtures between the two teams. So, I mean, we do play them, and it does tend to be in the league. We do tend to do very well. Most of the games, it's an aberration if we don't score 1 goal, between both sides. Even in the losses that we've had outside of the 1-0 loss in 2019, we've scored in every other game. So like we will score most likely, knock on wood, and we would expect that this would be a great opportunity for this Chelsea team to win. Let's talk a little bit more about Potter though. Comes in, I think there's going to be some interesting fan sentiment towards him. It's also an interesting moment for the club as the transfer window is going to the most muted of a close for Chelsea at this point, as people are pulling their hair out, screaming on live streams, absolutely all caps, tweeting or Xing for and asking for anything positive to come out regarding reinforcements for the side and the club. How is Potter getting on beyond the results in terms of what is he trying to do tactically? How different is it from what we would expect to see, having, whether you would say just having watched him or having trauma from having watched Graham Potter at Chelsea previously?
And I think there is definitely a discernible difference in what they're trying to do under him in these 3 games. So he's trying to emphasize a more front foot, a more progressive kind of West Ham, quite different from what they're essentially known for in terms of their philosophy. But if you look at them now, they've prioritized playing out from the back. There are a lot of, pretty intricate build-up schemes where even the pivot isn't being used. And a couple of the stuff that I saw at Brighton when I was obviously watching Potter before he came to Chelsea, a lot of wide players combining, so 4-man wide overloads, very, very nice rotations, and essentially breaking forward at speed after drawing the opposition towards you. So tends to be working pretty well for them. But as you know, we've sort of also talked about just about prioritizing playing out from the back, for example. So just to give you an example, Dan, out of all the games in the Premier League where they've had like the top five possession this season, two of them have already come under Graham Potter in the three games that he's been in charge of. So they're keeping a lot more of the ball. They're essentially trying to have these sequences where they're more stable, where they're trying to pick their moments. So it's definitely a different West Ham than we used to seeing this season, which would be quite interesting to see. But from a tactical perspective, I generally don't know how elaborate I can be, but he's tried, I would say, a couple of different things from a macro and a micro standpoint. So against Fulham, he matched their 4-2-3-1, so they actually went back four. Then against Palace, he matched the back three. He went 3-4-2-1. And then against Villa's 4-2-3-1, he actually went with the back three. So he's tried, he's tinkered around. The big miss for him, for the manager essentially trying to get his best tools together, is that he doesn't have centre forward number one and centre forward number two. Mikhail Antonio, as we know, had that horrible accident and was, luckily has sort of looks absolutely fine after it. So hopefully he'll be back playing soon. And Nicholas Fulkrug, who was bought in from Dortmund, isn't also available. He's a menace in the air. So both those guys are out, and they've had to sort of, uh, I would say, switch it around because they don't have an aerial presence up front anymore. So he's tried to play Thomas Soucek as a number 10 to try and compensate for it for, an outlet for long balls. He's tried Mohamed Kudus at centre forward. Kudus has actually played there for Ajax. He's also tried Lucas Paqueta, who's a midfielder at false nine. So there's a lot of experimenting going on, and I think we're meeting them at a point where I don't think Potter knows exactly what his strongest 11 looks like, or what his tactics look like. He's just experimenting, trying to figure out the best relationships between players and basically take it from there. But we've seen during his time at Brighton, he loves to tinker. He loves to sort of play with a multitude of formations to keep oppositions guessing. So I wouldn't hedge my bets on them sort of coming with a back three or a back four. It could be essentially anything.
Well, it's very interesting to hear that we're going to get a bit of a grab bag type of tactics from Graham Potter in a match in terms of trying to just make something happen. And it feels like some of that really does come down to and is impacted by these unavailable players for him. I want to get more into some of the weaknesses, things that we've kind of seen or kind of continuing to put them into maybe a bad position that Maresca and team would like to capitalize on. But we'll do that after a real quick ad break. So stay tuned and we'll be right back. All right, Sam. So what is Chelsea planning to, or should they be planning to exploit within this side? And, I know that there's, maybe a couple other things that, you want to get into just in terms of the structure or how they're kind of setting up and maybe that play style. And then then how does that predicate into the issues that they're having?
Yeah, I think this nicely ties into, I think, what is different and why there is a shift in identity. So we know West Ham to be, except like under the last manager, they've been quite on the back foot. They've been trying to win the ball deeper and utilize long balls up front and try the quicker players and basically drive through lines. But here they're sort of prioritizing a lot more aggressive pressing. So you'll see them press on goal kicks. They did this against Aston Villa, who are, I would say, quite decent at playing out from the back. So I do expect them to come up against us and actually try and press somebody like a Robert Sanchez, because there is an error waiting to happen there. So they will press high. They usually go with like a 4-4-2 with Paqueta plus Kudus, in the absence of the centre forward sort of pressing and making sure that the central midfielders are joining in, the wide midfielders are joining in. So sometimes they put like five or six players in there trying to win the ball back. Essentially against Fulham, they got two goals from defensive errors, and there was, I think, one more game where they managed to nick a goal from like a defensive issue. So they do are sort of getting those results from pressing teams high. So it does look like a pretty strong press. So expect it to be quite aggressive. But what they've stuck with out of possession is that they go again with like a mid block, which is a 4-4-2, and then Alvarez, who's usually one of the central midfielders, will drop into the back line and make it back five, and Suchek, who's the number 10, will drop into central midfield to make it like a very compact 5-4-1, and then essentially then they try to frustrate the opponent. I should add here, Dan, that all their centre backs have excellent, like supremely good dueling numbers, so in the air as well as in the ground. So trying to cross into the box, trying to essentially, figure out if you can get like a header at the far post, probably not going to happen. They've won the second most aerial duels in terms of numbers in the Premier League this season. So forget trying to find like headers. It's going to be very, very tough with the front line that we've had. So all those crosses that Neto and Madueke have been trying on the right hand side, probably not going to work here. So it'll be interesting to see if that changes in this particular context. And yeah, I think that's essentially it. And like expect a pretty progressive side. I think it would be pretty different, like a jarring difference in terms of what our best West Ham teams that we faced have been like, and the kind of West Ham that is going to come up against under Potter. So I would say that's going to be quite interesting to see.
And then as you kind of think about the things that we're not going to do, right? We're the set pieces sound like it's going to be maybe an effort and futility, and maybe we shouldn't be counting on a center back necessarily scoring for us on the day. Are there things that you like in terms of matchups for our players and how they're going to be able to effectively execute against a West Ham side that's a little undermanned at the moment, though you might argue that we feel the same way given some of our injury concerns. But our list is definitely not as long as theirs, which I guess is a plus positive there.
Yeah, for sure. And one of them is going to be, I think, correlated to the centre forward crisis that they have. Just don't have a vetted goal scorer. The third choice centre forward is Danny Ings, but clearly he isn't, ready to play 90 minutes. He's obviously come of age, very, very good finisher, also pretty good in the air. So he's come on, I think, post the hour mark in a couple of games, but I don't know if Potter would be that adventurous when he wants to press high and essentially like throw Danny Ings into the mix. But you look at their goal scoring under Potter, and it's familiar woes from the time that he had at Chelsea, where a lot of XG, but probably not converting as much as they should have. They've managed 4 goals in 3 games, Dan, under Potter, and 3 of them have come in a single game. So that's going to be something that they have to change. He's tried, like I mentioned, to maybe get a little bit of height in the front line, pushing like Thomas Soucek up. Soucek also scored against Fulham in a quite advanced area. But yeah, in general, it looks like it's hard to figure out where the goals are going to come from. The wing backs, I should add, are quite adventurous. Van Bissaka and Emerson are sort of pushing forward and trying to provide the thrust in the back three. So those two guys are definitely ones to watch. Emerson has already scored a goal. Van Bissaka has created a couple of really, really good chances. I think against Aston Villa, he was the West Ham player with the most touches in the attacking third. So he's getting like a new lease of life under Potter. But I think the wide players is where you should definitely look at with Kudus and those wing backs. But other than that, the centre forward is a big, big issue. The second thing I'd probably say, Dan, is that can be quite vulnerable because they're still trying to learn how to play out from the back. So a lot of the times you see them trying to pick cute passes, but they're intercepted in the middle third, and yeah, that's where they're supremely weak. So for multiple reasons, obviously the midfield of Guido Rodriguez, who I don't know if it's going to be fit. Alvarez, Edson Alvarez is there. And then you've got Thomas Suchek. None of those three guys are basically suited to playing back to goal, sort of receiving under pressure, trying to navigate tight spaces. So if you can press them hard and you can press them aggressively, there's every chance that you rob the ball and try to sort of like create an opening from there. So I would put my money in there in terms of a team that's trying to transform its play style makes a couple of mistakes, and that's definitely going to be something that you have to take advantage of. And the third I'd probably say is like a lot of teams have tried to do this against not just Graham Potter's West Ham, but West Ham in general. The wide centre backs aren't really suited to defending in this particular setup. The wide centre backs here, Dan, in the three that they have right now. So Kilman plays They've got Mavropanos who plays. But the third centre back, they've tried Aaron Cresswell at left centre back, and then they've tried Sofal at right centre back. And those are the two guys that you should be targeting. A lot of the times, Aston Villa were trying to draw the wing back out, so Van Bissaka out. They were trying to get all of those players on the wings outside, and then trying to put their attackers 1v1 against the likes of Cresswell and so forth. I think that's where you get a lot of joy. So if you get somebody like a Pedro Neto or Anoni Madueke against somebody like a Cresswell, if it is a back three, then I think you're definitely going to get a lot of joy.
And you kind of talked about a couple things related to the midfield, and I think there's some discipline issues you could kind of dig into there, and maybe just like from a giveaway perspective, this would be a great game for us to be able to capitalize on some quick turnovers and really using our wingers, using our speed in certain positions to really put West Ham under pressure from a attacking perspective, where we would be able to, I think, capitalize a little easier than if we hold it back and try to pass ourselves into a goal.
Yeah, so I think the last two things that I'd like to point out in terms of weaknesses sort of have a relationship there. The pivots I mentioned are quite slow. And now that they're asked to press quite high, so you'll see the central midfielders actually push up. And here they'll have to push up on Enzo Fernandez and Moises Caicedo. And I anticipate a lot of problems happening there. So unless Graham Potter asks the West Ham pivots to, sit back and asks his team to basically sit in a back five or a very compact standoffish kind of shape, if they're looking to press you, try to bring out those central midfielders. They're quite slow. Socek is slow when he's turning. The other two guys also struggle when they're in transition. So try to find those gaps, and I think you can definitely hurt them on the break. And the other thing is just discipline wise, like I said, because they're slow, they tend to cause a lot of fouls. So if you look at Socek and if you look at Alvarez, a lot of yellow cards between them. Alvarez is on 8 yellow cards for this season. Socek is on 7. So 15 between them. Lucas Paqueta has 6. Emerson is 5. Guido Rodriguez is 5. So there's a lot of yellow cards. So expect like at least, I don't know, a record number of like at least half their outfield to get booked in the game. At least that's one of my predictions. Probably 4 or 5 yellow cards, simple.
Oh
They've also
gosh.
got 3 red cards in there. Yeah, it's probably got 3 red cards in there. And obviously, we sit on top of the fouls table as well. So if you had to ask me, I would probably put like a bet on getting like a total of 10 yellow cards in the game would be quite possible and a high number of fouls. It's going to be a stop-start game, but if you can get one of those pivots on a yellow early, if you can get Mavropanos on a yellow early, going to be quite an interesting evening for the rest of the team.
It does beg the question about like just who the official is too, because sometimes you'll get a foul that doesn't necessarily get called at a high level until very late in the game, and then you'll get the exact inverse sometimes where it gets called super early and actually the game is a little bit cleaner in that regard. But I do agree with your assessment that with our lack of discipline at times, or potentially having people play out of their natural position and force some really uncomfortable one-on-ones that cause them to maybe foul a little bit more aggressively, that I don't know, it'd be very easy to view a world where between these two sides that the over on fouls was 15 or 16 between these two teams. Like I don't think that would be unrealistic, and I think a like 4 cards between the two teams would probably not be unrealistic either.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, just I think anticipating the change in play style where there's a lot of emphasis on being aggressive. And I'm also looking at a team like Villa, which is obviously in the reckoning for top four. So if the mentality of, a relegation threatened side under the new manager is like, no, we don't sit back, we press, then I think that's where I'm taking my assessment from, saying then they'll probably look at us and say, okay, look at Robert Sanchez, look at, Colwell, all of those guys in the backline have made errors playing out. So press them. But the counter sort of point to that is that we have shown that we're very good in terms of eluding pressure, and Maresca likes that. He wants to entice the opposition to press. And when you've got players like Lavia, Enzo, Caicedo being able to sort of like weave through pressure, then it can cause a lot of issues. So I do anticipate like a lot of pulling back, fouling, a lot of tactical fouls here and there, which is why I said like discipline wise, it'll be quite interesting to see. I don't know if like any of our guys are sort of discipline threatened, but from their perspective, I think they'll definitely be sort of biting their fingernails and seeing, if by like halftime or like by 55 minutes, they've got to sort of take very calculated risks in terms of who they have to tackle and how.
Well, let's get into some of those questions you want to throw at me to figure out and discuss what we think will happen in the game. And we will do that after our last ad break. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Okay, Sam, your turn to flip the script. You got a couple of questions for me that we can dig into, some related to the match, and then some that are a little bit more structural questions, I guess you would call them, as again, we get close to deadline day here and are watching a lot of other clubs do business. And, I guess we can at least be very excited about what the Chelsea women's team are doing, because they're doing, between the men's and women's teams, maybe doing the best business overall the entire window.
I've been waiting for the Walsh announcement, so that just happened and supremely elated to see it. What an incredible window it's been. I mean, to go out there and make a splash of that kind when you're like, I don't know how many games unbeaten now into the season, but just just incredible. I think that's ambition, and that's also it sends a statement that you're already performing above expectations, and your first response in the market is to actually strengthen and make sure that you're not resting on your laurels. So, yeah, I completely echo your sentiment in terms of if you could do that with the men's team, would have been amazing. But I'm also somebody who's not very trigger happy, so I do see, everybody sort of being conditioned in a Pavlovian way to sort of expect like 15 signings in a window. I think now is the time to sort of take very well thought out gambles and figure out then if you can sort of strengthen your team over the next, not just like half a window, but like over the next 2 3 years. And if that means waiting till summer, we wait till summer. So
Yeah.
yeah, but very happy for the women's team. Absolutely overjoyed and can't wait to see them in action again.
Well, yeah, and likely on the path to win. It feels like everything that's available this season could absolutely be, could we get all of them? Feels like we could. So very, very positive times. But I'm sure you've got some other questions, but hit me with those.
I think the first one is probably something I would say is quite flavor of the season. If you could make maybe one signing before deadline day, which position would it be? And if you have a name, I would love to hear it.
Gosh, I mean, I don't know if I feel like I've been tricked into thinking it needs to be a striker, but like that's, I think we've talked a lot about this. We know that Lavia is not going to be necessarily available. We're relying on Moises Caicedo to effectively be the number one and available with every single minute of what's available for the rest of the season. I mean, it doesn't seem like we're bringing Andre Santos back, so we're just gonna kind of close the book on that one. If we're gonna give up some forwards, it would have been great to sign a winger or an attacker. I mean, it's very interesting to see. We were linked to Duran in the summer. Would have been great to acquire his services at that point in time, Samu's services at that point in time. So now I don't feel like seeing us linked with Ferguson does not inspire a ton of great confidence heading into the end of the window, and so I'm actually like more willing, as much as it's like terrible and I think they needed to do some work. I feel like we're up against making like multiple bad decisions, and in soccer and football, that bad decision likely exists for a longer period than the tenure of the people who have made the decision. So I'm almost at the point where I was like, would not want us to do anything in the absence of like making a bad acquisition of a player who actually doesn't add the appropriate value in the position, locks up dollars for a player that we could go after. But I know that like if you don't get Champions League, you don't get a front kit sponsor. There's just gonna be a lot of reckoning this summer, and so maybe that forcing function does result in some change at the upper levels of the club, and we can kind of allow somebody else to have the reins with a little bit more of a intentional thought and design around this team, the player recruitment, and putting us in a position to be successful. So while I did want signings earlier in the window, I'm almost at the point where I just don't want anybody else to come in unless it's bringing back players that we already have, so that we're not committed to any type of long-term investment.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think at this point of the window, you're looking at quite a bloated squad. I mean, you obviously see a lot of players who haven't got the game time they've probably merited and obviously aren't quite happy with their game time. So maybe the priority here is to sort of ensure you have funds irrespective of what happens in the summer in terms of can you finish in the Champions League spots. Obviously, the Club World Cup is there, so there will be a healthy injection of cash, I'm hoping. But yeah, probably just laying the groundwork for summer is something that could be prioritized. And again, you don't want to spend 50, 60 million on a center forward that you want to compete with Jackson for like 5 or 6 years. You just don't make that decision at the drop of a hat. And like you said, if I mean, we really have a lot of concrete interest in Dell, 60 million rejected from Tottenham. You've got sort of interest in Sheshko. Matt Law said that. So if he does come and he's forced to make the move from Leipzig, then obviously he will cost a pretty penny too. So probably just hold off those decisions until summer and see like if you have any other options that you'd love to consider because 4 months, 5 months is a long, long time in football. But I think that that completely is a very pragmatic way of going about it, and 100% would be completely aligned with your thought process there. So well done. The second question is probably like related to the game. So we do know that there have been, I mean, a lot of tremors after that City defeat. So how do you think the attack lines up here? Like Jackson, 7 games without a goal. Madueke obviously got that goal a little lucky, but other than that, he basically just vanished. Was at fault for a couple of goals, and Kunku didn't do anything when he came on. Neto struggled to get in. How does your front four look like, except Palmer, of course? Like, what do the rest of the players look like for you in attack?
Oh gosh, I mean, it does feel as if Nico is the default with Palmer, so you've got two of the decisions locked in there. Yeah, I mean, I don't think you feel like there's a ideal or perfect grouping of it. I mean, we most likely, I guess I'm going to go with most likely. Feels like Jaden Sancho start with a Neto on the right wing. I'm getting a vibe. I don't know if it's the right answer. But I feel as if that might be the solution that we go for. No other justification than
Okay.
just vibes. Like I just think I think it's gonna be. I mean, to your point, like Madueke gets a goal, but there's definitely some questions about the defensive element at the moment, and you probably
Hmm.
don't want to put I guess Reece James under a ton of pressure on the right hand side because you still want to get him back into the best possible condition over these next series of matches because it's been a long time since his body's had this much football in a short window. And like, we'd like to see him continue to build a foundation, to be healthy, to be available, to be contributing at a high level between now and the end of the season. And, you don't want to force him into having to make, a lot of, terrible one-on-one challenges or things of that nature. And so I think, you know, would you align with that? Like, would you feel like that's the right type of mental model to think about? Getting those best players in our positions, keeping them in the best spots possible, and trying to make sure that, like, even though you might sacrifice, a winger who's contributed less goals in the entirety of the season, it may give you better play, better stability in the match.
I'm quite intrigued because I think with every manager that goes through a spell where results aren't going their way, and maybe they have a this this moment of self doubt where they doubt whether they're just doing the right things or not. I think with Maresca it'll be interesting to see if it arrives and how it manifests in tactics. Like if it's like freeing up one of the right backs, either Gusto or sort of Reece James, and just say just go bomb bop and sort of like do whatever it is that you do in the attacking third. Maybe that's something that we see. But I do believe the longer this inconsistent run of results goes on, we might see something of like a curveball from Maresca in a desperate attempt to try and improvise. We saw that from Pochettino, where he inverted Kukureya and then we were unstoppable towards the end of the season. I think it's the Conte holding up the three fingers, sort of. Sorry, Alonso holding up the three fingers for Conte, and sort of like us turning a corner. Maybe this Italian has something up his sleeve as well. But I think there have to be a couple of changes from that regard, especially if you're not making any signings. So um, it'll be probably safer to maybe just play Reese here for another 60 minutes.
Yeah.
You look at the next three games, and it's Brighton twice and then Aston Villa. So those are going to be very important games because one's a cup competition and the other two is like must-win games to make sure that you're keeping pace with top four. So Reese will be required in those games.
How close are you to your hypothetical shifting Jackson out to left wing and placing someone else as a false nine, whether it be, Pedro Neto? I mean, like we're going to say most likely Felix leave before the end of the window. It seems like that could potentially happen. But seeing a change in who's playing centrally while keeping maybe the same players. Are you feeling like you're close to wanting to see that?
I mean, I was thinking about it today, and I sort of asked myself, what is maybe if you say the hypothetical situation that you were to play an Nkunku with Jackson, what would what would the out of possession setup look like? Because every time Maresca is asked about this, saying why doesn't Nkunku play, why doesn't Felix play, he has this one response where he says, "Who's going to defend?" And if the entire emphasis is on being compact, out of possession, making sure your shape is good, because we know Nkunku isn't the best defensively, and if you put Palmer on right wing, then you're asking him to track the opposition fullback. And you don't want him to run 50, 60 yards on counterattacks the other way to stop people. You want him closer to goal, receiving in those advanced areas, which is why I believe he's not being played out wide. He has to be played in the center. So maybe the solution here, Dan, is that you do play Nkunku, say, at number 10, or you play him on the left wing, and then out of possession, you actually shift Jackson out wide to the left wing and ask Nkunku and Palmer to press as a front two. I think that's the only solution in my mind, which works for both Nkunku and for Felix. It will take a little sort of tweaking around to do because you obviously have to be dynamic, but in sustained spells where you're playing against teams where there is a little bit of, possession and they want to keep the ball, you can make that switch around and make sure that Jackson sort of doing his duties to track the left winger. So he works hard. He's got that craft in his game. But maybe that's how you look at it. So those are maybe like one of those curveballs or changes that Maresca could be looking at, saying maybe it is time to get the guy who scored multiple seasons with like double digits in goals and assists, and maybe we need that to sort of break the rot. So that's what I'm looking at. I'm trying to figure out what his response is going to be from a tactical perspective, from an individual perspective. Who's going to be that difference maker in his eyes? And don't I don't think we're too far away from seeing one of those changes happen. It's just intriguing to see which one.
All right. Well, any other questions you have for me or predictions we should be making? Is that the time that we're at?
I think we should definitely go with, like, you gave me your 11, so we should definitely go for score predictions as well as your ambitious, adventurous prediction.
Ooh. Well, as I noted before, we do not typically tend to end these games without scoring a goal. I'm gonna go with a Chelsea 2-0 win. Like, because I think for as bad and as on top of Robert Sanchez we've been over the past couple of days, he does seem to exist in a universe where you either get the best of him or the worst of him. And so I feel like maybe he's going to step outside of the mirror universe and he's going to walk into the reality where he's a fantastic shot stopper. And so I'm going Chelsea 2-0. I think that we will win. I think we'll get our 3 points. And I think as much as we've seen from Potter trying a little bit of a different thing here with this West Ham team, maybe some regression from him back to days of yore when we enjoyed or did not enjoy, rather, watching him struggle to manufacture goals for our team.
Wow, okay, that's pretty good. I mean, clean sheet is quite interesting against the side that is struggling to score goals. I would say that's pretty pragmatic. But yeah, we have a way of conceding goals in situations where we shouldn't be conceding goals. So I'm definitely intrigued to see how that turns out. But um, yeah, for me, I don't even know if Sanchez starts this one done.
Mm.
Like I said, like if I'm waiting for a curveball, then that could be it. But Jorgensen is sort of thrown into the mix and saying, you know what, you have 10 games to prove yourself, play for your freedom. So yeah, maybe that happens, but I would probably go for the 3-1. I think that's how I'm looking at it. I think
Okay.
tactically there is a good matchup in terms of the personnel. I think there could be weaknesses to exploit, so probably go 3-1. But like ambitious prediction, I've already made one saying that there could be an entire lot of yellow cards. Um, but I do believe like this match will be won by the wingers. I think it could be Madueke or Sancho finding a way against those wide centre backs and giving us a good way in. So hopefully a goal or an assist by the one.
So I think the outside the box prediction is I'm going to say some player affiliated previously with Brighton, just from a the ghost of past element in terms of Potter being a ghost of our past and Bright being a past of his as well, and for several of our players will be involved in a goal contribution for us. Not necessarily don't want to predict an own goal or anything of that nature on our end, but whether it's they assist it or they end up scoring it. One of our former Brighton players will help insert the dagger into this result and get us the 3 points.
I would love it. I mean, if this prediction comes true in some weird fashion where by the time we face West Ham, we have like Evan Ferguson on loan and he ends
Oh
up
God,
scoring
no!
the winner or
Stop!
something.
Stop! 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 No, the registration deadline's going to hit before then. So, like, we're recording it now. If we even if
Hey,
we
who
brought him in
knows?
tomorrow, we'd miss him for the registration deadline because you have to get it beforehand.
You
So,
never know, Dan. You never know.
maybe just
So
his aura, his presence in the stands would be enough. Who knows?
oh.
Look, we've made some predictions. We've had a chance to look at
Mhm.
weaknesses. We had a chance to look at strengths. We talked a little about what we think Maresca can get done in this game. Maybe just before we close out here, how critical in your mind right now is the win in this moment for Chelsea?
On a scale of 1 to 10, has to be an 8.5. I think it
Mm.
is absolutely critical. You cannot afford to go on anything close to the kind of run that you've gone on right now. And I don't think any of the teams around us are going to struggle anymore. Newcastle on Isak fuel are going places. Bournemouth look very, very good. Forest obviously dropping off a little bit, but they're still a very solid team. So I think there are going to be multiple contenders for top five. So you have to break out of this rut somehow. So no more dropping points because you drop 3 points here, sort of 2 points here, or 3 points, whatever here, you could find yourself sort of facing seventh or eighth in the next couple of game weeks, which you absolutely don't want from a confidence perspective. So I think it's absolutely crucial. Dan, what about you? I mean, from scale of 1 to 10, how badly do we need this?
I think it's 10. I think the feeling now, knowing that we've effectively, I would say, like, nothing is certain in life until it's completely confirmed. But with the performance of the English teams in Europe in the Champions League, it seems very, very unlikely that the fifth spot wouldn't get Champions League. And so, with how tight the top of the table is at this moment, with how close the people are behind us, you don't want to slip any further. And I think that, if you do, it allows the negative thoughts to creep in about, like, what happens if we don't, or what are we going to have to do with one less game, one less game, one less game. We're looking at, well, this will have been the 24th match, 14 games left in the remainder of the season. And you don't want to have to think about the fact that if you lose this result and West Ham were to draw or win, if Bournemouth, if Aston Villa, you mentioned, were to win, then go level on points with us, like, it is just so narrow still at the top. And 3 points, if something were to happen with Newcastle and City, is enough to bring you at present right up behind Forest again. It's like, please, 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 against a team that should be beatable, punch down at them and don't meet them at their eye and trade blow for blow. Like, absolutely assert the dominance you need to. Walk away with the 3 points and think about the fact that you have now the 14 games will be left ahead of you with a little more breathing room, a little less stress, a little more ability to potentially get to a point this season where you feel comfortable where you're at and back in the top 4, top 5 where you want to be.
I completely agree. I think, yeah, it's just trying to build a little bit of momentum. Like you mentioned, if
Yeah.
you want to get into those crucial months where obviously you're going to get into the knockouts of the European competition as well, you want to go in good nick. And it's definitely not going to be a lot more rotation than was being seen in the first 10, 15 games of the season. So it'll be quite interesting to see how Maresca handles his squad as well. There will be probably a lot more disenchantment in terms of want to play. World Cup is on the horizon. So a lot of stuff going to happen. And I think we will see a lot more stories about players not being happy and whatnot. But hopefully there's enough in the team and the management to sort of navigate through that and push towards a finish, because you can't really the attack is sort of like going down at an alarming rate. So you have to stem that regression. That's one thing that I'm hoping to do. Score more than 2 goals for once. Get some feel good factor back at the bridge, and hopefully the rest will take care of itself.
Agreed. And we hope that is the case. And we hope when we are back with another match review podcast, we're talking about a win against West Ham, as we would all like to see as faithful Blues supporters. But that's going to do it for this episode. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast and being a wonderful member of that Chelsea community. But until next time, you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.